Okay, let's talk about Tasmania, an island of absolutely staggering beauty, but one that is also home to some even more staggering contradictions.
And that brings us to the first big puzzle we're going to try and solve today. How can a place that's officially rated one of the most welcoming on the entire planet also be almost completely invisible to it?
We're calling this the invisible island paradox. And when you start looking at the numbers behind this welcoming, yet kind of overlooked island, they really don't seem to add up at all. Okay, get this. Despite being ranked the third most welcoming region on Earth, Tasmania manages to capture a tiny 2.6% of Australia's international tourists. I mean, it is so overlooked that there is a literal Wikipedia page dedicated to all the times it's been accidentally left off world maps.
But, and this is where it gets really weird, the very few who do find their way there, well, they don't seem to want to leave. The average tourist stays for 25 nights. And for those who actually bring their own car or camper van over on the ferry, that number skyrockets to a massive 45 nights. So it seems like once you actually find the place, you kind of settle in for the long haul.
So what in the world explains this dynamic? This invisible but irresistible thing it's got going on? Well, the answer seems to be buried deep in the island's history, which brings us to the paradox of kinship.
You know, the entire story of modern Tasmania, it really starts with a surprisingly small number, just 10,000. That's the rough number of founding families who settled the island way back in the mid-1800s and basically built its modern identity from the ground up. Now, from that small group, an incredible 65% of today's population can trace their family tree right back to them. Just think about that for a second. That means nearly 2 out of every 3 people you meet share this really specific, concentrated heritage. And the result? Well, over about 7 generations, those original families multiplied 37 times over, all in a pretty closed-off system. Now, this isn't some weird fluke, it's just the inevitable math of what happens when you colonize an island. It created one of the most genetically homogeneous populations in the entire developed world. So you've got this deeply rooted, tight-knit society, and that has some pretty profound effects on the economy. Which leads us to our next puzzle, the priceless but also kind of worthless land. A true paradox of value if there ever was one.
And the economic whiplash is, wow, it's stark. Just look at the housing market. You could buy a house in a town like Queenstown for less than the deposit on a house in the capital, Hobart. I mean, that's a 75% price difference for a place that's only a few hours' drive away. It's wild.
So you got to be asking yourself, why? Why is land surrounded by World Heritage wilderness so cheap? And this quote just sums it up perfectly. It's priceless by beauty standards for sure, but it can be worthless by modern livability standards. The real question isn't, is it beautiful? It's, can you actually live there? And the reason really comes down to the absence of what some call the technological stack. It sounds fancy, but it just means all the essential stuff we need for modern life to, well, work. We're talking reliable internet, quick access to hospitals, good schools, jobs. Without that stuff, paradise very quickly becomes unlivable. And a beautiful property with a private lakefront, it ends up being an investment for some remote owner, not a home for a local family. All right, now for what might be the most jarring paradox of them all. This is one that confronts pretty much every single visitor, and it's a tough one. We're calling it the Green and Bloody Island. So first, let's look at the green part of the story. And honestly, it's incredibly impressive. Tasmania is a world leader in clean energy. It already runs on 100% renewables, mostly hydropower, and it has this super ambitious plan to generate 200% of its needs by 2040, basically becoming a giant green battery for the mainland. But then there's the bloody side. While the vast majority of tourists go there looking for pristine nature and unique wildlife, almost all of them end up finding this instead. A truly industrial-scale slaughter of that wildlife on the roads. We're talking about nearly 300,000 animals a year. That breaks down to 1 animal killed on the roads every 2 minutes. So, how do all these pieces fit together? The invisible island, the tight-knit families, the crazy property prices, the environmental contradiction, it all comes together in our final section. The paradox that really explains all the others, the welcome and the wall. So there's this really well-documented, deep-seated resentment towards outsiders. They often call them mainlanders. They're seen as, like locusts who are just there to drive up prices and disrupt the local way of life. And this quote from a local paper, it sums up the feeling pretty bluntly.
But here is the massive contradiction, the wall they run into. The state's economy is in serious trouble,
and it desperately needs the very people that it often resents. Tourism is a huge chunk of their economy, but the state is actually forecasting negative growth. Population growth is flat, and young people are leaving in droves to find work elsewhere.
And you know what? This isn't some new thing. There's a repeating cultural pattern here, where the island's identity is kind of defined against another. It started with the shame of the convict stain, then it morphed into the gay stain with some of the harshest laws in the Western world, and now it's settled on the mainlander stain.
So what you end up with is this huge gap between the marketing brochure and the actual lived reality. The offer is a welcoming, pristine paradise, but the experience for a lot of outsiders can be a total social freeze-out, constant encounters with roadkill, and even something they call a mainlander tax, where you get charged more just for not being a local.
And all of this leaves us with one last, really big question that goes far beyond just one island. Tasmania is a fascinating case study. It's a warning, and maybe it's even a blueprint. But it really forces us to ask, can any society that builds its identity on excluding others ever truly be sustainable in our connected world?